it's very consistent with Maslow's needs hierarchy. With any way that we sort of come at this, we have to sort of take care of those basic needs, emotional and physical safety, and then move up into that idea of real engagement. But one of the things that has been really useful over the past couple of years and makes me both most proud and excited of the early investments we made in sort of taking Dave Weikart's sort of realization of active learning and sort of taking it to scale through the Weikart Center and getting it ready for this very moment is this commitment, as Kim has said a couple of times, to recognize that even if your big goal is to improve youth outcomes, whether it's high school graduation, it's academic competence, it's employment, whatever it is, the reality is how learning happens is young people go into an environment. The quality of that environment determines their level of engagement. The level of that engagement and the quality of what is being offered in the experiences really helps them develop these skills and beliefs that we talk about. And then if they really get those, we used to talk about sort of getting them into their sort of abilities backpack, so they can take them with them, then they will take them wherever they go, and they will be more successful in whatever it is that they're doing. But that idea, which you can see gets called QuEST, is one that has long undergirded this whole approach to assess, plan, improve, because we want you to assess the quality of what you're creating before you make a plan to improve it. Don't just make a plan to improve it based on, we need kids to have these outcomes, so we're going to assume we've got the right kind of context, and we're just going to pour more content in. It really was pushing it from the other direction. And what's been so exciting about watching, frankly, sort of watching K-12 education catch up with youth development. Sorry for the K-12 folks on the call, but really that's what's happened. Watching K-12 education catch up with youth development, not because they didn't intuitively understand this, but because the accountability structure was so focused on the outcomes, is that in things like the National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development, which just sort of did a big report and wrapped up a couple of years ago, in now the Science of Learning and Development, this is now being reinforced in really, really powerful ways that are now driving sort of the education folks to go, oh, we have to pay a lot more attention to the context in which learning is happening before we can expect that young people are having experiences that are going to get the kind of outcomes that we want. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Kim, but I just wanted to make sure we got that up there, because it's so important to what we're doing. It's so important to why we have both the start with the pyramid in terms of the standards and getting people to really own and embrace that's what good looks like, that's what quality looks like, before the assessment. And that's the other thing that's been so important. It's not just that we sort of walk in with an assessment tool. It's an assessment against standards that people have actually embraced, which is what's made this so successful. So we've got this sort of underlying theory of how learning happens and basically how good practice happens in a setting. What's changed? When we put this thing together, we put it together as a pretty tight package. And frankly, we put it together as a tight package because we were working with a bunch of programs that didn't have a lot of options, didn't have a huge amount of capacity in terms of collecting data, et cetera, doing training. So we were looking for the most efficient way to package it together. But fast forward 10 or 15 years and the world has changed, and it had changed even before COVID. So how is this packaging working now?
So one of the things that we really are trying to emphasize in our work now, and this I think was amplified and emphasized even more in the last year, is how flexible these tools really are and can be. Continuous quality improvement is by definition a flexible approach that you sort of take to, can leverage to systematize how you go about learning and growing and improving. And the YPQI was sort of originally packaged as a way to say, if you want to just be all in on this sort of improvement journey, we've got a way to make that easy for you. And that's still very much the case. We hope that working with the Weikart Center really does help to make that easy for organizations to really embed these practices and processes in the way that they do business. But we also know that that there's as we've sort of collected different pieces of it, being able to kind of leverage the different pieces and parts in different ways is really important. So as we launched our social and emotional learning focused resources a couple of years ago, and I think we'll talk more about the history of that in a few minutes, but we've been finding that, you know, that there's really an opportunity to mix and match, right? The sorts of skills that support positive youth development also support social and emotional learning, and the sorts of skills, you know, the adult practices that support young people's social and emotional development are the sorts of practices that support positive youth development outcomes. And so, you know, the particular program quality assessment, you know, doesn't matter so much. The particular sort of workshops, there's ways to sort of leverage this and make it work. And over the course of the last year, we worked with organizations around the country and internationally that were basically breaking the thing apart and saying, we need to do this differently. Programs are operating differently. They, you know, young people have different needs, our staff have different needs. And so how can we take these pieces and leverage them to be what we need? And that's exactly what we try to do. We always emphasize, this is always about meeting people where they are and helping them get to where they need to be. And so we think of our tools and resources and supports as a variety of assets that can be leveraged to help people and organizations improve their work to serve young people. And this sort of QuEST framework, I think, is so helpful. That sort of comes back to say, you have to start with the elements of quality, and that, you know, the things that are described in the PQA may not be the only things that you have to think about as a program leader in terms of quality, but they should certainly be on the radar in terms of the staff practices that set the stage for young people to really be engaged in the experience so that they can learn.